Hey, so I want to talk about real quick something that can be fun to play with, especially if you're building your scene. You maybe need I know we talked about the AI fog, which is really on my go-to when it comes to creating fog environmental stuff. But sometimes if you want like a puff of smoke or something like that, real small, you can create basically just really quick fog, like a fog emitter, to kind of adjust the viscosity and the resolution of maybe like a puff cloud. And there's a bunch of ways to do this stuff too, like in terms of using the Bifrost system up here, Bifrost fluids, which is usually what I end up doing, um, especially for fluids. But for just basically for creating fogs, it's in the FX tab. You'll be creating a 3D container and then creating an emitter. I like the AI fog created like where you were able to kind of like adjust the fog, the coordinates of like a geometry box, and it works basically the same way in terms, but you can actually see the box here too, which makes it a little easier. So you can actually fill up your environment if you surround your environment with the box, you know. The only thing about doing this kind of fog is sometimes the render may look a little different than what you're hoping for with the Arnold compared to the Maya. The got this thing running. Try to stop it here. I'm using my laptop, so it tears my laptop up to try to do these fog renders. I usually use the other machine when I'm doing this kind of stuff. So I may have to like pause this video to kind of wait for these renders to go. Like right now I'm trying to get to the Maya software render. So pause this. So yeah, so you can actually kind of render this out as a fluid instead of a fog. It's like two simulations basically. I I don't really wouldn't probably suggest it for the Arnold because it really doesn't show up with the fluid. It'll show up in the fog. Um, Arnold render doesn't for some reason read the liquid render, but it will the fog, which may kind of work for that. In that case, yeah, I would go about using the Bifrost, which I'll go over sooner, or I'll go over later. But just kind of a quick little overview of it, how to get started and how to start playing with it. Some adding colliders so you can kind of add colliders to it and kind of fill up an object if you're trying to like make something, give the action of like pouring out. You can actually take it and convert it to a polygon so you can render this out in the Arnold. So it can be like kind of frozen in time, and then kind of basically how we worked with the yin cloth. You delete the history on it or delete it and render it out as a mesh. So let's just get started real quick. So we'll create a new scene. Don't save. Get rid of this for right now. So we're in the FX tab. You want to go up to fluids right here and create a 3D container. You can open up the box and kind of see what you're going to be dropping in here, your resolution, but you can see that whenever, if it's at default, you'll be able to see that in the attribute editor over here. Now, if you notice right off the bat, this box appears, and if you just hit play, this thing's starting to emit right there in the middle. This is your emitter, and you can see them over here. You can select either just the emitter or the actual fluid itself. So first things first, I'm going to crank this thing up to 1,000 so I can have time to see it. And you need to be in the classic version of Maya if you're not already there, so you can see your timeline, you can get it rolling. And you can't adjust all these things while you're have it simulating. Some of them you can, the majority of them you cannot though, so you'll need to like stop it and start it to kind of adjust certain things, especially when like the base resolution. So if you're keeping your voxels square, and that's talking about basically these resolution coming in here, it's going to flow a lot faster. But if you want to adjust the resolution of this grid, kind of crank it up this way. There we go. I'm going to crank it up to 40. Then your emitter, your fluid will start looking a little bit more foggy, in other words, instead of pixelated. But it also is going to act on the render time too. And if you want to adjust this size here, you can too. So 20. Now I'm going to raise this thing up here, so I got my ground plane. Then I'm just going to hit play and see what happens. Back it up and recache it. So you see it's flowing a little bit better, I think. You adjust your viscosity down here, you're going to get thicker. It's going to take a little bit longer to render. You may start skipping a little bit. My laptop skips a little bit whenever I crank my viscosity up, which is why I usually kind of keep it down. But you can see it's getting a pretty nice little mushroom cloud going on here. Now you can move this emitter basically anywhere. So if you select the emitter, kind of move it to the ground. Now it's going to kind of, however long you have timeline you got, it's going to start caching all this fluid, this fog, and start filling this box up. In other words, it won't go outside the box. Now, if you notice your emitter has a gravity on it, right above the viscosity, I'm going to turn my viscosity down a little bit, just so I can do this demo without any problems. There we go. If you crank this gravity down to 0, it's going to fill the bottom. Let's do it at negative. You can actually do it at negative. There we go. Now to fill the whole bottle, basically. What it was doing was just staying right there at 1, but now it's kind of like trying to force itself down, in other words, and it starts to spread it. And if I do crank my viscosity, you will be able to see it more. See it better. You could always go and raise the resolution. Lower the resolution of it so I can get a little bit faster render. But it will kind of not, look a little bit more pixelated. So you see, you can kind of this kind of powerful. So if you're like kind of wanting to light your scene or put some fog in your scene, you can just kind of create a surrounding environment and then basically kind of just let the emitter go and put the fog on the scene. Now, the good thing about it is you can create colliders with it. So if you have your scene and you don't want, obviously the fog is going to go pass through whatever, but if you can basically create a collider on it, so the fog will collide with the object. So let's just bring this emitter up. Now it's just dropping really fast. We're starting to drop really fast. I'm gonna turn my resolution up a little bit more, my viscosity down. Something going on there. I'm going to create a sphere here just for demo. Kind of make it big. Right there in the path. I'm going to select my fluid, and then I'm going to control select my sphere. And I'm going to go up to fluids, make collide. And now it will kind of spread over. It'll still want to force itself down, but it'll spread over the actual sphere. Now you can do different things with the dynamics of the actual fog itself. There's a bunch of different stuff down here to kind of start playing around with. Let's look at the shading real quick. The shading is where you control the color. Now, just to kind of demo it in the Arnold render, or actually bring up the ground plane so I get some sort of light. to render it like that. The Maya software. This is what your Maya software is going to start rendering. It renders it more kind of like it maybe should, which is kind of like pros and cons of using it. It's like if you're using Maya software to render, which I really wouldn't do any of that. This is why it's kind of easier to start understanding the fog emissions or fog systems basically with this fog legacy. But in your Arnold render, I need to drop an Arnold light in there actually. You start getting something, not too bad. And obviously your render time is starting to be affected, so it kind of takes a little while. I'll just stop that. But you can adjust the color over here, the fluid, the base color. The incandescence of it. You can ramp it up. You can actually ramp up the selected colors. Add another color in there, like maybe a darker blue at the bottom. Probably need to turn it up more, the viscosity of it, to get those other different colors. But yeah, you can adjust the opacity of it, the transparency. You can actually turn it up to where you can kind of barely see the fog, a little bit kind of emitting. Barely start to see it. So if you had like a fire kind of going here and you wanted to create an emitter from the fire, you had your log pile down here, you could create just like a little 3D container, or 3D container over the fire log, and then just crank your emitter up and your gravity up, which will already be up, and just have like a little nice little color down here where you've adjusted, maybe turned it to a fire color. Then turn your transparency, or like a smokestack where you want little puffs of smoke coming. So it's pretty fun to play around with and kind of get an understanding of that physics before you go mess around with the heavy duty Bifrost, which takes a little bit more from your computer to run, but it looks a lot more realistic. You can also preview this as a fluid, in other words. So if you go down here to maybe up, liquid simulation, basically. It starts simulating it like liquid, in other words, instead of fog. You can adjust the tension, kind of like maybe look more like it's pouring out of there, like it's dripping or something like that. Go back and turn my transparency up, transparency down so I can see it more. So you can really mess around with the simulation of that style if that's kind of what you're going for. See it the way it more or less pours over the side of the object. Then you can well, let's see what this looks like. I'm curious. I'm gonna pause this and let this run. I want to see what this full when it's done. Yeah, so the fluid simulation fog looks pretty good. Kind of render it down like that. So if you had some kind of like smoke cloud coming up, I would suggest maybe using this, possibly even the fluid simulation, because it would be a little bit easier to conceive and kind of control, I guess. So let's actually add a surface render solid to it, so you can basically kind of render this out as a solid. Kind of see what it looks like then. I'm gonna take this thing and delete this guy. Back to my fluid. I turn the liquid simulation off. Underneath your surface right here, you've got volume render and you've got surface render. If you click surface render on it, kind of takes on a whole new shape now. It looks more like a big goo coming down, or like almost a rain cloud. And it won't go outside your containment unit down here. But I noticed in some of the past projects, people are trying to like model like liquid pour in action or something like that. This is kind of a quick way to kind of make it look like you've something pouring out, without having to model it basically. The only thing about the Arnold, if you render this out now, you're still going to get that fog, which kind of makes it look kind of cool, but it's still that basic fog color. You don't get much of a liquidy kind of feel. I would suggest doing all liquids though with the Bifrost. But what you can do is you can basically, let me add a collider in that, kind of fill a bucket up real quick. Put like a, say if you had a floor, which, my plane here is acting as my floor. Fill this box up here with this goo stuff. Oh, don't let it live. Just gonna go face mode, extrude, scale in, extrude again, push this down. You can't really emit with this, the legacy stuff, you can't really emit from object, but you can like kind of make like a pipe or something to kind of put in there so your emitter kind of comes out. Let me just do that real quick, see if I can get something cool looking. Kind of trick the scene. Hopefully it won't bunch up and come through the sides up here. If that's the case, you just kind of need to expand your pipe or whatever you got going on, or lower your emitter down. Actually, let me push it down there. So I'm going to select my fluid, select my cube down here, make collide. Cache this out. Oh yeah, it's coming through my pipe. I need to adjust my pipe. Yeah, there it goes. Maybe able to make a collider with this right here as well. But the purpose of this is you can kind of adjust different attributes about this liquid now. The shading quality, the viscosity, probably if you turned it down. Turned it up a little bit, it would look a little thicker. So I'm just going to get to a point where I like it, like if I had a cup that I want to kind of model, was kind of in action, was pouring out some coffee or something like that. In this case, I've got this red kind of tearing too, because I'm trying to make it hit the sides. There it goes. Right, let's So I'll pause this and run it again. Okay, so it's in the middle, and I've shrunken my container down here so I can kind of get some bounce up whenever it hits the sides. Have to let it run. It's kind of filling up the container. There we go. Now it's kind of wanting to kind of go over the side of it. So you could just go to select your fluid. Oh, let's see what the Arnold render looks like real quick. Probably a thick, yeah, like a thick substance coming into a box. I won't let this run. Kind of looks like that powder stuff almost. So I'll stop that. So I'm going to render it out like this, in other words. So I go to fluid modify and convert. There is fluids to polygons, and it comes up with all these triangles. I probably should have adjusted that in the box. It doesn't have one. Okay. So once you get that done, go back to your modeling tab, to your mesh, and just quad railing. Turn it to quads. So, there you go. And you could crank the number down basically that. So now it's basically a mesh, and you can throw a shader on this for whatever color you want to. Actually, I would probably go ahead and delete the history on it. Let's assign a new material. Let's turn it to that blood preset. So now you've got this liquid core on here, which looks really creepy. So it's kind of a fast way to get some fog in there, like you're seeing, and it's also kind of a cool way to kind of get like a nice little model pore that's reacting to a collider of some sort. And when it comes to like adjusting this stuff, it's like your viscosity levels and stuff, your attributes coming in. So it's a little bit of playing around with as it's running. Just need to make sure that your computer is going to be able to handle it. This is not as intense as the Bifrog stuff on the computer itself, which is why it's a little easier to get started with this kind of stuff, and plus the actual understanding of it. So, but yeah, that's it. So have fun with this, and interested to see what you come up with. Thanks for watching.